Remember a time when it was scandalous for a man to show off his neck skin? Neither do I. But as these portraits show, the more formal or fashionable you wanted to be, the more neckwear you needed to hide. In this video, I will be showing my journey of making tall Regency neckwear to look just like the portraits from the early 19th century. Perfectly tall, stiff, starched, and structured. Sometimes neckwear was just so tall, it would just spill out over the jaw. Oh my god, so fashionable. Hi, I'm Phil, and I have a lot of nerdy thoughts, and I want to share them with you. Get them out of my head. But I've been sewing since 2020, and I've since taken a jump into the abyss of sewing garments. I hope you'll follow me in my journey and subscribe as I figure out how to be the ideal early 19th century fashionable man. So what I realized from wearing a cravat only once at this point, it will inevitably fall down due to sweat or the angle of the knot, even if it's starched. And I've realized I think the whalebone stiffener is the secret. And I'll be showing you my experiments of me making a whalebone stiffener with other materials, of course, not whalebone, and putting it in a cravat so I can achieve the perfect neckwear. So in my previous video, the Dandy Deep Dive, I examined cartoon illustrations from 1800 to 1830 of very fashion-forward dandy, and I wanted to take some fashion tips from these cartoons actually, so I can be informed about making some historically accurate fashion choices when it comes to putting together my Regency ball look. If I've learned anything about what a dandy loves, it's high neckwear, and I want mine high. By finding portraits that really validate my desire for really high neckwear, I get excited to do my own take of it all. I've realized it can be hard to actually get it to stay up. Even if your cravat is starched and pretty stiff, it'll inevitably show a little bit of neck skin. And most, 95% of male portraiture that I've seen from the early 19th century, there is no neck. And I'm convinced that it's not just a cravat and starch. And it could be easy to assume that it's neck stocks, and you know that there's probably a lot of neck stocks, but having read through some literature, some cravat literature, nerd, 4 books. It's like The Art of Dress, The Art of Tying the Cravat, Code de la Cravate, and Neckclothitania. I learned that they actually differentiate between neck stocks and whalebone collars or whalebone stiffeners. And reading in this French book, I realized you put the neck stiffener in the cravat. This one page is just like, when I said like in the cravat, I had this like crazy moment where I was like, that's it! And I think on Pinterest, there's a picture of potential whalebone stiffeners. And I think the only reason I know is because one of the pictures has these boning channels. It basically looks like a corset for your neck. And I recreated one, and I'm gonna show you my journey about making 2 different kinds of whalebone stiffeners. So it can be easy to assume that these are stocks, and the stocks are, you know, solid. The judgmental quote from Code de la Cravate on mounted collars, which I believe is what they call neck stocks via Google Translate. Lazy people, clumsy, or godless people who have never been able to manage to get by in a passable manner imagined having a collar covered in either whalebone or elastic wire with some woven fabric with this or that not adapted in advance and thus fastened behind the neck. A completely prepared cravat using a buckle which can be tightened at will, which comes to us from Prussia, Austria, or Russia. If you see in the pictures, the Russian collar actually is just a neck stock, and it also differentiates from the whalebone collar or whalebone stiffener because it has a picture right next to it. And if you look, you can see the kind of the pins of the whalebone, the baleen, I guess, which are basically whale teeth, or they suck it in, and the baleen collects all of the krill. And so it's not actually bones of whale, but this cartilaginous baleen of sorts. Further reading of the book has its own section on baleen collars or whalebone stiffeners, I'm pretty sure they mean. It says to put the whalebone stiffener in the cravat. If you read The Art of Tying the Cravat, and if you look at each knot, about 60% of those actually say a stiffener is requisite, a stiffener is necessary. Use a whalebone stiffener. So the combo of a starched or unstarched cravat and a stiffener is what makes these portraits look how they do. And I'm gonna show you how I did it. So making a stiffener has taught me so much and put so much context into all of these dandy pictures that I've been looking at. Particularly with how the neckwear was drawn, it almost makes sense that actually how much more real that this concept of the neckwear spilling over. I have, what is it, faux boning, right? It actually, it like stays close, and then, anyway, I'll get into the actual thing later. So reading this book, I've learned a few other extra tips when perfecting the look of the cravat. It suggests that the cravat should actually sit quite perpendicular to the chin. Let the front part of the cloth be brought in a line with the extremity of the chin. Nothing gives a person more the appearance of a goose than to see a long part of the jaw and chin projecting over a neckcloth. My experiments with the stiffener alone already show that it looks more like the cravats presented in men's portraits. Also, once I put a cravat with a stiffener inside, I had another question answered. Fashionable creases. If you look in Neckclothitania, you'll see the difference between the round, smooth collars, which look very much like a cylinder, and then there are collars that have a indentation on these sides. And some of these books actually talk about the fashionable creases in the neckwear. Even the dandy cartoons have shown, kind of comically, all the varieties of neckwear creases. Though I still haven't seen any realistic portraits that have such segmented neckwear dents. An example of the dent is, in the whole art of dress, one style of cravat preparation called the ballroom should be the point for a slight dent extending from under each ear, between which, more immediately under the chin, there should be another slight horizontal dent just about the former one. Not all knots and tie styles have dents, but others can have up to 3 creases, like the hunting tie. Also, this dent has like 3 rows of dents. Basically, the boning channels kind of help that shape along. So I take a very mildly starched cravat, spilled my starch solution all over the floor. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna start with unstarched first. And actually I learned plenty from unstarched. The dents are actually possible because the cravat is actually standing away slightly from the neck, just barely perpendicular. The fashionable cravat should be perpendicular to the protrusion from the jaw. Just enough room since it sits under the jaw and not quite as tight against the neck. So let's make this thing. I only had basically 2 pictures, one possibly realistic one, and about 2 or 3 illustrations of this actual neck stiffener. And so I just kind of drew a shape. I did a lot of experiments and I drew a shape and I worked on the shape until it just fit along my neck quite well. I made a straight version and I made a kind of a curved version to see which one I liked better. I basically treated this like a corset and sewed boning channels and added some, I actually had plastic straws. My plastic straws were just lying around. I cut them up and I put it in the bin because I didn't have any boning at the time. I actually really liked how it worked. I think they're a little bit too chunky. You see kind of examples of it sticking through, but I'm gonna get some faux boning. I then sewed on some arbitrary places to put boning channels, and I sewed that, and I added a little bit of fusible interfacing just to give a little bit of stiffness to this scrap fabric that I had. Then after it, I had two stiffeners that I could experiment with, and it was already very informative without even putting a cravat in. I get a little chicken, and I tend to not want to use like the nice fabrics, and then I had to tell myself like, it's time, it's go time. I have 9 weeks to finish everything. It's time to make an actual cravat with the nice linen that I have. And so I sucked it up, and I did the whole like hemming of a chunk of cravat. I thread pulled. I made that cravat. I made a rectangular one because I really wanted to experiment with a rectangular one. A lot of the knots that I'm interested in require a long one to come over your chest, even under the arms. So I kind of just looked at these book illustrations, and the book actually shows one version of folding when it is a square or triangle, square folded into a triangle, starched. And then there's also this version that looked like it made more sense to put a cravat in. I can't decide how many folds it should be in. Maybe I could just fold it in once, but I also just kind of wanted to put it in the back, and you'll see it's giving a little bit of wrap around for the stiffener. And so here's one with the straight version, and then I tried another with the kind of the U-shaped or the V-shaped one. This is the experiment cravat, and pardon the stitch line right down the middle, which I just did to make it longer, but that's not actually what I'm gonna do. And then it was time to be brave, and I actually didn't starch this cravat, but I still learned a lot. Basically ironed down the cravat around the stiffener, and you gotta be careful, at least the whalebone elements inside my stiffener are plastic, so you kind of have to be quick with your ironing to not melt the stiffener. And honestly, after I put it on and I tried a really crazy cravat tie, known as the ball, but that's fine because I will be attending a ball. So this looked like the appropriate one to have. And as you can see, it pretty much checks out. I can move my chin around here and there, and it's not gonna fall. It's gonna stay tall, and I'm not gonna have to worry about any neck skin showing. So hopefully now you know the secret to achieving a truly portrait perfect and structured and stiff cravat in your early 19th century costuming dress wear. Goodbye!